Hi folks, Jeff here with my top 20 favourite Australian metal albums. As we're not going to any gigs for a while due to this stupid virus, I thought I'd enlighten you folks with some Aussie metal gems. This is the first of 3 top 20 lists of my favourite Australian metal releases, with the first being full-length albums and the other 2 lists being EPs and Demos. And believe me, it was tough to cut it down to a top 20, and I'm only doing 1 release per band. Rankings are a bit arbitrary, but top 3 are definitely in order. I've chosen Aussie metal as, despite a few exceptions, I think our scene has been underrated over the years, and there are many amazing releases that just didn't get quite the exposure that they should have. As you can tell, I'm not the youngest chap, so most of these are from the 90s, although I've squeezed a few newer albums in that just sound like they're from the 90s. My tastes are pretty broad, and I've lumped a few things in that aren't purely metal, but I don't care for pedantic overclassification of styles. I've provided links in the description below if you want to check out more, and feel free to post your own favourite lists in the comments below. Enjoy. Number 20 is The Hecatomb by Temple Nightside. This is from 2016 and is the most recently released part of my top 20, but don't expect it to sound too modern. I'm not a fan of using silly words like cavernous, but that really does fit this album, which lurches from crawling slow death doom to faster black death, all with deep powerful vocals over the top. To me this sounds like the bastard child of Disembowelment and Beherit, and I certainly mean that as a compliment. The Disembowelment due mostly to the overall murkiness, the slow sections, and occasional use of clean moaning vocals like on Your Prophetic Throne of Ivory. Beherit mostly for the throaty whispering vocals and the slower moments. I'm yet to see them live, but they now have members of Vassifor and Grave Upheaval, so I suspect they'd be monstrous and level everything. Looks like they've got a new album coming out soon too, so can't wait for that. Number 19 is Safety in the Workplace by Magnacite. This is one most international viewers may not have heard of, but believe me, it's a bloody firecracker. Magnacite were a short-lived Melbourne grind band made up of people from Christbait and Beanflipper, as well as vocals from Scott Harper, who ran Deported Records, that put out Beanflipper album, the Spaz Subversion split, and best of all, an awesome compilation called Sounds of Ordinary Madness, full of great Melbourne bands. This is essentially a faster, grindier version of Beanflipper with absolutely rabid vocals. I think Captain Cleanoff would be a good comparison, and Cleanoff even covered the song Slave on their Europe 2013 tour CD. The short, fast songs like Slave and Head Cleaner are rip your face off material, but there's the longer songs, Humanity's a Lie and Exist As Me, that I prefer, with Exist being my favourite with great build-up before a blistering blasty chorus. These blokes really knew how to write both hooks, as well as pants-shitting fast bits. Production on this is top-notch too, with a dirty yet clear sound and nice and loud drums, although I always love Napalm Death Peel sessions as far as loud drums. Good luck finding this for sale, as only 500 are pressed on CD, although there are a few songs on YouTube that I'll link below. Number 18 is Finger Food Fetish for the Morbidly Abnormal by Kutabare. If I had to choose one word to describe this album, it would be filthy, as it sounds like a bunch of sewer-dwelling Deros taught themselves play with just Autopsy and Impetigo albums as reference. Kutabare features a couple of blokes from grind legends Undernism, and for this album they had Damon Bloodlust from Bestial Warlust on vocals, or should I say gurgles. He certainly makes an impression by being beautifully unintelligible with all sorts of guttural sounds. The music is mostly mid-paced, sludgy death metal with some grindy bits thrown in for good measure. Plus, I swear I hear some Godflesh guitar bits on the stylishly named Rhyme of the Ancient Marinated Corpse. I tried seeing them twice when Damon was singing for them, but they pulled out of both gigs, bastards. Which is a shame, as he certainly put on a show from all reports. They split for a while, but are back now with Mike from Filth on vocals, and I finally caught them live and it was bloody awesome. This album was released on Razorback Records, who don't seem to have copies for sale anymore, but there's plenty on Discogs, so check it out. Number 17 is the self-titled album by Abramelin. Abramelin are a particularly brutal Aussie death metal band, been around for about 30 years in one shape or another. This is pure death metal with some excellent tight playing, but for me, the highlight is always Simon's powerful and deep voice. Holy dooly. Live, he's a maniac on stage, and I was very pleased to see them play live again. Highlights for me are the two StarGazer songs, plus older song Humble Abode. Plus this even has a cover of my favourite Dead Can Dance song, Kantara, which they've mellowed up quite a bit. I've always wondered what Dead Can Dance thought about it, and I think I remember reading that Abramelin had to pay some royalties for it. Whoops. Pretty sure this album was banned in Australia as they foolishly included the lyrics, which were just a little too perverse. The censors wouldn't have had to read very far, as first song Misfortune is probably the worst of the lot. Century Media were nice enough to re-release all of Abramelin and Acheron material in a box set, which is well worth tracking down if you can. Plus, the band have a new album called Never Enough Snuff. It's available for pre-order, so check out the link below. Should be a ripper. Number 16 is Outro by Portal. These folks should not need any introduction, as they're rightfully known as one of Australia's strangest exports of twisted death metal. They developed a thicker and sludgier sound on later albums, but I just love the weirdness of this one. At first I hated the quiet drum production, but now it sounds nicely sinister to me. As with all Portal albums, it's dense and takes a number of listens to really appreciate what's going on, but it's worth it. This album has Damon and Denny from StarGazer on bass and drums, and their skills really add to the swirling chaos. Shame they weren't on more. 13 Globes is probably my favourite song, as it's with its eerie descending section that leads into a almost normal sort of riff. Plus the cover art's just stunning, and this album cover is usually framed hanging on my wall. Horrifically beautiful chaos. Number 15 is Nobody Likes a Thinker by Massappeal. This is the oldest album on the list, and it's a legendary piece of Aussie punk from 1986. Probably shouldn't be on the list of metal albums, but who cares? It was a key part of my youth. I should have had the original vinyl version of this, but I lent it to my mate Adam 30 years ago, and I've pretty much given up hope of getting it back. Plus now I have this shiny reissue. Very much in the vein of DRI and Black Flag, this is just great metallic punk with rabid vocals and razor-sharp riffs. It's a bit more straightforward than their later albums. Favourite songs are probably Pissed on Life and the marijuana-themed Deadheads, with its awesome chants of "Pull more cones" and "Bong on, yeah!" Cover art by Ben Brown from fellow Sydney punk band The Hellmen is iconic really, and he did a ton of covers and flyers in his distinct style. I still have an old sleeveless shirt. It wouldn't fit me as it's probably shrunk over the years. Relapse Records were nice enough to re-release this album with the Bar of Life 7-inch demos and some ridiculously fast live tracks, so check out the link below. The second album, Jazz, is just as good really, but might be a bit trickier to track down. Number 14 is Mutation, Voodoo, Deformity or Disease by Roskopp. They're a grind band from Melbourne that, in true Melbourne fashion, members ended up in about 10 other grind bands, including Eternal Rot, Garbage Guts, Headless Death, Radiation Vomit, and The Day Everything Became Nothing, to name but a few. Best thing about this album is it's not pure grind, but has some death metal influences as well, and just really interesting songs. There's a lot of variety and atypical song structures, and most are under 2 minutes and don't overstay their welcome. There are also a few rework songs from their 7-inch, which is just as killer really. One highlight is a great mix of growled, screamed and pitch-shifted vocals. Plus, the added bonuses of an Autopsy cover of my favourite song from Fiend for Blood, and also Matt from Hemda adding his crazed screams to a song. There's another band worth checking out. Sadly, they didn't stick around for too long, but I was lucky enough to see them live a few times and they certainly didn't disappoint. Definitely check this out. Number 13 is The Monad of Creation by Mournful Congregation. Doesn't get much more epic than this, with only 4 songs clocking in at an hour. Funeral Doom can all too often produce boring songs with little action, but Mournful Congregation have just the right mix of sorrowful melodies and crushing heaviness. Keeps your interest and moves along at a nice languid pace. Damon's vocals really add to the atmosphere with a great combination of long, drawn-out growls and tortured cries. Acoustic passages are also used well to give brief respites between the doom and gloom, and the third song's entirely acoustic, which they repeat on later albums. Double guitar bit near the end of As I Drown in Loveless Rain is sublime, really. As is the brief use of keyboards in the title track that gives them a slight skepticism feel. And it's a tough call between this album and the later Book of Kings, which has better sound, but This album's much bleaker, and so it wins. Number 12 is Embrace Rapture in Disgust by Psychrist. Psychrist were a Kimbra band that never seemed to quite get the international recognition they deserved. It's played absolutely killer death metal. They released 2 albums, an EP and a demo, and this is the middle release and my favourite, as it's just the right mix of black and death. It's really energetic music and quite technical, but they didn't sacrifice interesting and well-written songs for speed. There's also a nice mix of growled and snarled vocals too, and I really enjoyed Yuri's solos. He's always had a good, clean, melodic sound. I interviewed him for BMA magazine a few years before it eventually came out in '99, so I had a copy on tape for ages, which got a great workout. But they had problems with the cover art, and the original cover art ended up on this grenade 7-inch. Don't look too closely. They reformed for a few years ago, but only played one show, which thankfully I was at, and they sounded awesome, so it's a shame nothing more came out of that. I highly recommend trying to track down any of their releases if you like a mix of Suffocation and Immortal. Number 11 is Do Not Spit by Damaged. Hailing from Ballarat originally, Damaged were one of Australia's more unique bands with hyper-energetic blend of grind, death and thrash with rabid, throaty vocals from Jamie. This is their first album, featuring the classic 5-piece lineup, and it really was peerless at the time and influential on a lot of later Aussie bands. But with the craziness of the music came a lot of personality clashes, which led to plenty of lineup changes over the years, including Brutal Truth singer Kevin Sharp for one album. I had the pleasure of being at the final gig with original singer Jamie singing, where he spent most of the gig up in the rafters above the stage, refusing to sing or slagging off the band, which was pretty memorable. Honestly, I prefer to listen to a live recording from their first gig in Canberra at the legendary Terrace Bar, which was just much more intense and wild, with those songs sped up, which is impressive as they're already bloody fast. I have very fond memories of that gig as a whole, and everyone was blown away by Skitz's insane drumming and the whole band. I'll put a link below to the gig as it was great quality. Number 10 is The Scream That Tore the Sky by StarGazer. I'm not even sure how to review this album, as it's just bizarre really. StarGazer play a weird experimental style of technical black death metal, but they certainly don't sound like Nocturnus or Cryptopsy. I'd put them in a similar category to the perfect flow of Unquestionable Presence by Atheist, which to me is the technical death metal album. Well, this sounds like nothing like it though. This is a brainchild of Damon Good and Danny Blake, who are two of the more active members of the somewhat incestuous South Australian metal scene. This is their most expansive sounding band that allows them to experiment as much as they like, and certainly pays off as they somehow produced an album that sounds both ancient and fresh. Musicianship is top notch, with interesting riffs, explosive drums, and I just love it when the bass pops out of the mix. Big props to the vocals too, which are quite across the range and somewhat reminiscent of Misery's Omen tracks at times. Ye Old Magics is my favourite song, but they're all excellent really, and the only complaint I have is that they didn't re-record the classic song Mutation for this album. Next 2 albums are just as amazing really, so I recommend checking out any of them really. Plus they got a new album coming out soon. Number 9 is Phoenix Rising by Destroyer 666. Tame the Wolves probably has more classic songs, and Cold Steel rules too, but this is the first album that I bought, and it's still my favourite. There's just a raw energy to this album. It's difficult to describe, but I think feral is the best term. But despite the chaos, these are expertly crafted songs with perfect mix of memorable riffs and sheer aggression. This is also my favourite drumming performance on a Destroyer album, with a vibrancy the others are just missing. Plus the epic 3-way hit of I Am the War God, Eternal Glory of War, and Lone Wolf Winter is just devastating. I also love the corpse molestation riff from Sudden Combustion that they use on the title track too. Essential. Number 8 is Yeast by Christbait. Christbait were, for lack of a better term, a sludge band from Melbourne who remain as one of the heaviest and best live bands I've ever seen. And believe me, I've seen a lot of bands. I prefer this to their later album Dirty Punk Mother, as the songs are a bit faster and punchier than some of the laid-back, drawn-out songs on Dirty. This album was a change for the band, who had growled vocals on their prod demo, with singer Jason V going for a shoutier style here. One thing that Christbait did so well was insert really explosive bits into their songs, with title track Yeast being a prime example, swinging effortlessly from meandering doom to the main muscular riff which blows your head off. I'll never forget seeing them live for the first time, and the middle bass bit of Loose being all nice and relaxing, and then the build up of both guitars to a massive climax was just bloody monstrous. The original CD probably isn't the easiest to find these days, but thankfully the good folks at Goat Sound Records are finally putting out a compilation of all of their recorded material and a live set, so check out the link below, as I can't recommend them highly enough. Also, 2 members are now in a band called The Ruiner, which is pretty similar really, and their link's below too. Number 7 is We Are Death, Fuck You by Sadistik Exekution. This is a peak of Aussie insanity metal for me, totally over the top with excellent musicianship, but also raw and completely chaotic. Singer Rock isn't quite at his maximum insanity level as he is on later tracks like Volcanic Violence and Organised Sadistic Abuse, but I much prefer these songs and sound than the later era, which was just a bit too clean sounding. For all their weirdness though, they do write some killer death metal with a great mix of songs with crazy fast ones like Mathematicus and Spiral, slow ones like Evoke War Vomit, and the atmospheric Hades Valley. Astral Borders is probably my favourite song on here, with weird time changes, abusive vocals, a killer galloping mosh riff in the middle, followed by an ethereal Reverend Chris Hayes solo. Still sad I only saw him once in 2009, which is great, but not as berserk as the old show sounded. I think of this band as what Humongous's troops would play on the stereo in Mad Max 2 while they're driving around in their kick-ass Ford Landaus, raping and pillaging. Number 6 is Invention Destruction by The Day Everything Became Nothing. Holy crap, something not from the 90s. This is the second album from Melbourne called Grinders a Day, and it's chock full of massive groovy riffs, quality screams and pitch-shifted gurgles, very much in the vein of German legends Cock and Ball Torture, Gut and Muki Purulent. I love me a good chunky riff, and they just don't stop on this album, or the other two really, which are just as good. I think I chose this one. It has the thickest sound and the song cut, which I just love. Oh, killer fun live too, with Tony from Bloodduster on vocals, being a bit more sedate than usual, but some quality hijinks from drummer Marty too, who for a while used the most minuscule drum kit I've ever seen. His deceptively basic drumming really adds to the album and helps gives it its swing. They had very stylish design on their album covers, with most produced by bassist Xavier, who's done a hell of a lot of excellent design work for the Melbourne grind scene. Brutal. Number 5 is Totem by Nazxul. This is my favourite Aussie black metal album, bar none. It's much less keyboard oriented than their later releases, and this is just nasty, heavy black metal. Delabor's vocals are completely over the top on this, with great harsh screams, death metal bellows, and some sinister, Beherit style whisper bits. One thing I love about this album is the chunky death metal sort of riffs found on the title track Distance Begins and, best of all, Unearthed. The classic black metal tremolo style is also absolutely killer on songs like Amidst the Flames and Endless Rain of Power, and really gives the album its epic feel. Drumming from former Slaughterlord and Mortal Sin member and stand-up comedian Steve Hughes is nicely tasteful in the non-blasting bits and really adds something to it. Seance Records have reissued this on CD, LP and tape, so you have no excuse not to pick it up, and the link is below. Number 4 is A Necessary Evil by Misery. This for me is one of the best pure death metal albums from Brisbane band Misery from 1993. It's mostly mid to fast paced, but they occasionally go nice and slow and heavy as hell, as shown perfectly on Verted Prophet and Born Dead. They also have some nice, tasteful solos too, instead of the usual overdone whammy bar action. There's just something dark sounding about this album. Only thing I don't like is that the change in sound when they use 2 songs from the Astern Diabolus demo. Not sure why they didn't just re-record those songs. Well, the demo does kick ass. A shame they didn't also use the 3rd song from that demo, Morbid Dreams, as that song's bloody awesome. For some reason, the original CD pressing of this is worth squillions on Discogs, but I recommend picking up either the vinyl reissue from The Crypt or the excellent Evil Reborn compilation CD from Memento Mori, which has the album plus the 2 demos and 2 EPs, which are similarly heavy as hell. Number 3 is Fisting the Dead by Bloodduster. I've been a huge fan of Bloodduster since their demo days, and for a long time they were my favourite live band. I'm such a fanboy that I own the Cult album, even though it doesn't play as they scratched a pentagram into the master for some reason. It's a tough choice for their favourite album between their legendary debut Fisting the Dead and the follow-up album Straight Outta Northcote. Fisting won by a smidge, and both albums would be in the top 20 if I wasn't only doing one album per band. I had actually chosen Straight Outta Northcote, but once I re-listened to Fisting, I just couldn't stop smiling, so I won. And Killer Bloodduster groove was just as prominent back here in songs like Kill Kill Kill, Derek, and Simultaneous Pleasure Pinch. But it was used a bit more sparingly in their less is more ethos back then. I love the slightly shonky sound on this with loud drums and great mix of deep vocals from Tony and crazed screams from Jason. Plus the samples are just legendary with multiple Peter Jackson movies and of course the charming Bloodsucking Freak sample about a urinal. But comedy elements aside, this is also a killer grind album. I was very pleased when Relapse reissued this with the Yeast EP to a much wider market, and that Bloodduster were well known until they split a few years ago, as they really did deserve to be popular. Great band. Number 2 is Ludosphere by Canberra metal gods Alchemist. I actually think their third album, Spiritech, is probably their creative peak, but I still prefer this one, as I saw them live a lot around this period, and these songs are just seared into my soul. For the uninitiated out there, Alchemist played a weird, psychedelic, progressive style of death metal and put out 6 albums over a stellar 30-year career. This album isn't quite as insanely over the top as their debut album, A Jar of Kingdom, but it is more musically varied and certainly sounds a hell of a lot better. The first song, Soul Return, is a prime example of the variety of extremes on this album, with a brutal start section of blasting and growling before kicking into a nice mellow section that builds to a high-pitched slide guitar extravaganza and then morphs into a mid-paced close. I'll never forget the first time I heard this song at a Terrace Bar gig, and the middle slide section blew my somewhat fried mind. Other highlight tracks for me are the Eastern-sounding Yoni Kunda and Garden of Eroticism, which were always live favourites and certainly got the crowds a moving. I love this album so much that I own a second, still sealed copy just in case the main CD stops working. Good luck finding this album though in shops, as it was only released in Australia. You might get lucky on Discogs, and the Embryonics compilation that Relapse put out. There's a few songs off it, and there's a great starting point for Alchemist, so check them out. And number 1, Transcendence into the Peripheral by Disembowelment. This is my all-time favourite Aussie metal release, bar none. This album is as heavy as it gets. It oozes atmosphere and is completely unique sounding. I listen to this a lot while reading the Dune series, so now I picture epic imagery and barren and raucous landscapes whenever I hear it. Mostly it's slow death doom, but with bursts of powerful speed and alien despairing melodies. When I first heard this, it was in an old Canberra store, Impact Records, and I was listening on headphones and played a bit to my non-metal friend, and she just looked horrified and said it sounded evil. Instant buy. Sound is such a massive step up from the demo, with the reverby drums just so powerful, especially on Excoriate. As much as I love Trial of the Bow and later Inverloch, I really wish Disembowelment themselves would have produced another album or two with main songwriter Renato. I get the feeling that Your Prophetic Throne of Ivory was a newer song, as it sounds quite different. I would love to have heard more of this style, with the mournful wailing at the end. Disembowelment never played live, but one of my favourite gigs was an Evil Invaders festival in Sydney where Dusk, as Inverloch were then called, played a set of mostly Disembowelment songs. They took ages to set up. Once they started, the sound was perfect. I got to enjoy those amazing songs live with some of my best mates. The feeling when the first riff of the Tree of Life and Death kicked in was just incredible. Absolute masterpiece. So, that's my top 20 Aussie metal albums. Feel free to comment on your ones in the comments below. Up next will be top 20 EPs and then top 20 demos. Much the same format. So, thanks for watching, and feel free to subscribe and check out all my other videos. Cheers.